Hi and welcome to the 31st episode of the Edith series. I'm going to do a commented version of the series from now on because I do not want to bore you by making you read all this important stuff that I want to touch upon, and there's like a lot of stuff that I wanted to touch upon, so let's get right into it. Oh, this video is entirely dedicated to Gamal and Murilo. Okay, so the original Sims game, or the Sims Classic, is way different than the other mainline games in many aspects, but most importantly in terms of how strict it is when it comes down to its list of objects. Okay, so the objects are designed primarily taking into account their function other than their aesthetic contribution. Obviously, this is not to say that the base game objects are ugly in any way, shape or form, but for instance, if you want to have an object that contributes to the character's comfort motive, most likely you are going to buy a couch that little has to do with the overall intended vibe of the rest of your Sims house. Since I first got my hands in Edith Painter in early 2022, I kind of became invested in the idea of using it as a means of understanding the tree programming of the objects in the game. And I even managed to do my own stuff with the multi-sim soccer ball, partially based on Sims Online soccer ball, the diagonal object base, the Child Sims Can Cook mod, and the ongoing beta conversions with my buddy Purple Wowies. And I also became invested in trying to understand certain object behaviors that don't quite seem to make sense to me, at least not at the first sight. And that's where the Pink Flamingo comes along. And I wanted to pinpoint two specific portions of its code that makes it just a little different than your usual decorative object. The first one would be the way that Sims react to it as the players ask them to look at it. Okay, so from our understanding, the character's reaction towards a decorative object pretty much depends on the average value of the items that they already own. So if a painting is above 20% the average value of the current household assets, it's a very safe bet to say that the Sims will react positively to the object. Okay, so on the other hand, this rule does not seem to really apply to the Pink Flamingo's reaction algorithm. Believe me or not, the object performs a reaction rule that kind of deviates itself from all the other objects in the entire game. Okay, so let's take a close look at it together. So allow myself to adopt the Goth family as our poor guinea pigs for a little while. Let's see how Bella and Mortimer react to a Pink Flamingo as we command them to watch the object.
Aha.
Aha.
Okay, so as far as the Pink Flamingo's programming is concerned, there's a very basic and simple explanation as to how it works, and surprisingly, it does not have anything to do with the average value of the household items. We are going to take a look at the specific private behavioral tree that controls the character's reaction to the object. Okay, when I say that a given code is private, it basically means that the code is stored in the object's behavior-oriented resource indexes. And unlike the global trees, it cannot be called by other objects in the game, only the Pink Flamingo. The view interaction is handled by a tree that is labeled as React. Now we are going to double-click the tree's label on Edith Behavior Editor. And now we have access to the primitives and nodes that form the sequence of actions that compose the sim reaction. It may seem a little abstract and even a little scary when you look at it for the first time, but if you're like me, you are going to absolutely nail it as you expose yourself to it. After following a number of instructions that take the Sims to a routing slot that makes them close to the Pink Flamingo, the private tree React is called. So you can see that playSound is the first primitive that is called in the code because it has a green stroke, and Animate is the primitive that comes directly after playSound because that's where playSound true branch is pointing to. The first thing that the character does when they reach the Pink Flamingo is call a Simlish sound effect, sound event ID, and simultaneously call an animation event ID labeled as adopt to object considered. Now that's where the magic happens. Here we have two conditional branches that are based on expression primitives. And just like how the primitive's name kinda suggests, expression is the command that allows you to mathematically assign or compare just about anything that can be handled in numbers, like the household money, the game clock, the conversation topics, and the personality score. In this specific scenario, the expression primitive is establishing a conditional rule that checks if the active Sims playful personality score is higher than 6. And yeah, for some reason in this game, the personality traits are internally measured by the hundreds and only God knows why. Okay, so that being said, if the active character's playful score is higher than 6, they will react positively to the pink flamingo after looking at it. Otherwise, a false return will be triggered, leading us to a very similar expression primitive. Except its conditional rule asks if the character's playful score is higher than 3, or 300, whatever. If that's the case, the Sims will always be a little whatever about the pink flamingo. If the active Sims playful score is lower than 300, they will always react negatively to the object. And that obviously explains why we get different outcomes when both Mortimer and Bella react to the pink flamingo items. Mortimer's playful score is 700. On the other hand, Bella's playful score is 300 only. She's a serious fellow. Maybe we can examine the effects of this behavior more clearly when we manually modify one's character data. Okay, so let's open the behavior tracing window, change Mortimer's current playful value to 100, just 100, and see what happens.
Yuck.
The original Sims has a fair amount of weird and unusual behavior in its objects that have little consistency to the other objects of its kind. It's a tough call, but my early verdict is that it's possible that the original concept for the decorative objects in the game involved setting their likability exclusively dependent upon their personality scores other than the average household item values. Though it's a very interesting and valid concept, I believe that if all the objects in the entire game function like this, the game's behavioral system will become way too predictable and boring over the short term. So I'm gonna wrap it up for today. There are a few more weird factoids about the pink flamingo that I wanted to touch upon specifically, but I believe they will be more agile to just leave it for a future episode. Okay, it's good. Bye.